Welcome back to Crimson Ed Talks. We're here today with Laila Smith, the leader of IRIS, one of the most innovative research programs globally for aspiring high school students thinking about aiming for top universities both in the US and around the world. Today we're going to do a deep dive into all things education and innovation, thinking about shaping the future of academia. If you're interested in the intersection of humanities and STEM, or simply how education is evolving around the world, tune in for what's going to be a fast-paced episode. Laila, great to have you here.
So happy to be here.
Let's get us started. What role do you think online learning is playing in the future of education?
I mean, I think it's basically foreclosed on that online learning is critical to the future of education. I mean, universities, institutions, like no one is not doing this. And I just think the more that we can use technology to connect and sort of like, I don't know, prompt different interactive experiences and get our brains to think differently, the better. But Jamie, I want to hear from you what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I'm actually laughing a little bit because I think back to my own high school experience. I didn't have a single online learning component of any part of my education from age 5 to 18. And we were laughing earlier about being millennials, some folks in the Crimson community are Gen Z, and many of our students are even younger. But for some of our older cohort at Crimson, in that millennial crowd, and it's kind of a dystopian to think that actually there was no online learning at all when we went through high school. It almost sounds like we didn't have the internet or something. But to answer your question, I just think for so many of our students in far-flung parts of the world like New Zealand or Japan or even different states across the US, maybe outside of urban hubs like say Manhattan or parts of Palo Alto, there is such an opportunity through online learning to be exposed to all these different mentors, programs, curriculum that really means that your physical and geographical constraints become not irrelevant but largely diminished. And suddenly you can find motivated peers from any corner of the world. You can find faculty that can really help you with that exact problem you have, and you can really have your learning process really be unleashed. So, I think online learning has been a grand enabler. And certainly certain programs like online courses, Coursera and stuff, they haven't necessarily become as widely adopted as people might have thought. But I think the capacity for live online learning to any corner of the world is huge. And certainly Crimson's been built with that at the core of its delivery around the world.
I completely agree. And I think when I think about Coursera, I think part of the issue there is they do have many quality offerings, but there's an issue there with quality variability. And so I think, there's this kind of gap in first of all, interactive and also super high quality educational experiences that students need.
I would say a lot of universities are trying to make sure that humanities still stays popular as more and more students seem to be flocking, particularly those thinking about careers in technology or AI, different STEM fields. But actually, some of the sharpest minds that I know around the world working in fields like AI safety actually have this interdisciplinary education. How do you see the humanities and STEM disciplines working together in the future of education?
It's absolutely critical, isn't it? I don't know how much have you hung out with scientists? Is it quite a lot?
A fair amount, but maybe not as much as you. Let's see.
I just think my experience sometimes in hanging out with scientists and PhD programs and whatever and postdocs and blah blah blah. A lot of them are well-rounded, interesting people, but they do not have a humanistic lens and they don't have that toolkit. They might believe I'm thinking about these things in a really kind of logical, nuanced way. But I do think that sometimes their analyses lack a greater understanding of the social dimension, the cultural dimension, the political dimension. And so, I really think we need to help each other out, basically. And especially as these tools are being created, if we can sort of create more spaces for collective interdisciplinary thinking, hopefully it'll positively impact the creation of these tools in real time.
Now, looking forwards, what new skills do you think students will need to succeed in academia and beyond that perhaps we didn't need to have back when we were in high school?
Oh my gosh. I have some pretty abstract ideas on this. Okay, number one is sort of algorithmic literacy. We used to think about digital literacy, but really it's now all about how our experiences are impacted by algorithms. Understanding your experience and the nature of the kind of For You pageification of the internet and how the feed is impacting your experience of the world. The other thing that comes to mind is with that, the For You pageification is time. The way we experience time is so different now. Your For You page, your feed used to be chronological. You used to gain a chronological experience of what was happening to the people around you based on the Facebook feed. And then at some point, it became all algorithmic based on certain content being put to the top of the For You page. So I think being able to sort of like surf the digital algorithmicized landscape, which is atemporal basically, and then also like be super grounded in like your real life experience and a chronological view of the world. And maybe like, I mean, yeah, I love history, but yeah, there's something there with like having more historical tools as well to understand the world, because our experience of the world is so atemporal with algorithmicized feeds.
Certainly, I think one thing that I'd draw on there is people are so totally exposed to just endless amounts of almost addictive content these days across TikTok, YouTube, etc. For a young person to be able to sort of, fight this battle and actually maintain discipline and focus on their schoolwork, that's a really, really important skill. And I think more and more and more young people are just getting sucked into these just endlessly stimulating digital universes. And I think, some students that have that discipline to really say, actually, I'm not going to win the war for attention with this, AI TikTok newsfeed. Let's go ahead and just maybe turn this off for now as I'm focusing on my Iris project or whatever. It's very important. Okay. How do you see cultural diversity enhancing the academic experience for students, particularly at a time where America is kind of walking back some of its affirmative action?
This is a challenging question. The language that we use around this stuff is important, and I feel like the language on it is progressing. And yeah, I used to be super involved in these conversations when I was in college, and honestly, I am less at the top of that stuff now. I don't feel I could answer this question extremely well, but I talked about this before. But of course, being able to interact with people who come from different cultural backgrounds, being able to interact with people who have different opinions from you, and also being able to understand that like people have different modes of communication. I think that's like a really cool Crimson thing, honestly. Like we as a workplace have so many different types of people, so many different types of communicators, so many people from many different cultural backgrounds. And I think learning how to kind of like understand what people are asking of you and show up for them, even if you don't totally agree with how they're interacting with you, or even just kind of like trying to get over that in its entirety, is really important.
I love it. And
Yeah.
honestly, as a side note, one of the most exciting parts about, building Crimson with you and our crew over the last so many years is that diversity. It's kind of crazy, and I don't think we ever necessarily went about intentionally trying to recruit diverse voices. We just sort of went so global, and now we've got staff from the Middle East, from Dubai, from China, from New Zealand, from Australia, from all across the States, from all kinds of different backgrounds. And it certainly makes every discussion really fascinating because people do have all of these unique takes on it. I would also say, the undergraduate experience at these places, for many folks coming from international backgrounds, they leave somewhat of a homogenous environment and they land, for example, a place like a Harvard, where there is so much representation from all corners of the world. Certainly the proportions are out of whack a little bit, or somewhat dramatically in certain ways, but there's still just this amazing microcosm of the world right there, which I think certainly helps people to dream bigger and learn more and realize how much they have to see about the world. So I certainly found that to be really humbling as a Kiwi from New Zealand. Now, what global trends in education excite you the most?
Oh, global trends in education. I mean, I think you already said it, but like access having to do with geography and talent and quality. Something that I'm kind of interested in is like how basically like what are vocational skills, like what is trade work basically is really opening up, I think. So like for example, I think that coding is basically going to become a trade skill eventually. And I suppose the question for us at that point is how do we, I don't want everything to turn to trade schools. I want people to be equipped with, like liberal arts education. Like I believe in that stuff. I believe in art. I believe everyone should be exposed to everything, and just feel like they're not excluded from it. But yeah, I do think that like, rather than needing to take CS50 and do a coding course at Harvard to be considered like a good coder, just the idea that like you can get this stuff via like, Google's free access educational programs and other kinds of free access educational programming is great. And we should gain as many skills as possible as, interesting people.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that deep dive into the future of education and also some of these really interesting trends that I think are playing out live right now, possibly changing the education landscape more in the last couple of years and probably the next several than I think we've seen in the last decade. With that, we'll move to a rapid fire round. Alrighty. What's the biggest benefit of online learning?
Access.
STEM or humanities? Which is a bigger impact in the future?
Ooh, humanities.
I love it. What's an exciting trend in education today?
I think like trade style learning of previously, high-tech skills.
What's the key to making education more inclusive?
Funding, money.
And your vision for the future of education in one word?
In one word?
Hard.
Do you have a word?
No, do you? I would say exhilarating, because I think the future of education will be a lot better than the past. Laila, thanks so much for an incredible episode.
Thank you so much.